Hi guys, Dr. Ken Nordberg here for another fireside deer hunting seminar. It's kind of a good one. You know, I get questions from hunters all over the U.S. and even Scandinavian countries about hunting whitetails, and especially older bucks. And it's something I spent most of my life studying. Began in the early 1960s, and I'm still doing related research today. And who knows, I'm still finding new things about whitetails, especially related to changes in climate. So it seems like it never ends, you know, and that's been the fascinating part of doing this kind of research. Well, today we're talking about hunting farm country bucks. And I've done a lot of that. In fact, Gene and I did a lot of hunting with cameras of farm and country bucks in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and Iowa as well. And especially when we go into a new area where we've never been before, it can be as tough as bow hunting. You know, getting close, getting full-frame pictures of big bucks. And we've done a lot of research in this regard of learning how to become regularly successful at hunting such bucks, which of course it's all in this book, my 10th edition of Whitetail Hunter's Almanac. But farm country bucks can be really, they're actually tougher to hunt than wolf country bucks, I think. And I based that on my own experiences. Now, there's a lot of good reasons for that. You know, a lot of hunters believe that because farm country bucks are so used to seeing people, farmers working in the fields, cornfields, you know, they see humans every day, that they get so used to seeing them that this makes them particularly vulnerable to hunting. But that's not true. It might be, you know, if you start a new farm, like say you cut down a whole bunch of trees and homestead and start a new farm, well, the deer around there, they might be vulnerable for a while. But like whitetails everywhere, they finally learn, you know, what they need to do to be able to survive in places like that. Our Minnesota whitetails, the lower southwest half of Minnesota's prairie country. And whitetails didn't start moving into that country until the 1940s in Minnesota. And when they moved into that area, they had to make a lot of adjustments. Some of them really tough for whitetails to do. Like, for example, you know, in the spring, you know, they migrate to special areas too in the winter, spend their winters in places where they have good cover from winds, especially in prairie country. You get 30 below and it's the wind blowing 25, 30, 40 miles an hour, like in blizzard conditions. That's hard on whitetails. It's hard on does with fawns. Fawns can die in that kind of weather because the does just can't keep those unborn fawns. Fawns warm enough during periods like that unless they have good cover. Well, anyway, but they had to learn other things too, like come spring, you know, they go back to their previous home ranges, spread out in that prairie country. Well, most of that prairie country today is covered with corn and soybeans. And there isn't an awful lot of, there aren't really large areas that can support wooded areas in that prairie country. Most of the wooded areas are small woodlots and some brush lands, maybe on wet lowlands and wooded edges of streams, waterways, you know, and swamps, bogs, posted lands. There's a whole mixture of different lands there. And but everywhere where whitetails live, and especially bucks, which are particularly elusive, there are posted lands there. Lands where deer have learned you just aren't going to be bothered by hunters who are displaying hunting behavior. And those are the ones they fear the most, like hunters making drives and still hunters who spend a lot of time walking around all day long and changing direction to do, stopping often to look and scan around. That kind of behavior is quite frightening to whitetails. Stand hunters aren't so frightening because they're not pursuers. They don't go after deer. They don't stalk them or trail them, that kind of thing, in the snow. So they don't worry about them too much. But they worry about accidentally bumping into some at short range. Older deer have learned this is something dangerous. You don't want that to happen. So they had to adapt to that. They had to adapt to living amongst humans all year round. And as the first whitetails that moved into these areas learned that, well, these harmless farmers on their tractors and working the fields, tilling and plowing and planting and later on harvesting corn and soybeans, and they don't bother deer, so they aren't particularly worried about them, but they've learned those same humans can become dangerous hunters, just like wolves in my study area. My whitetails don't run like crazy heading for the next county every time they see a wolf. They've learned they only have to worry about wolves when it appears that they have become a selected prey. The wolf is stalking them. That's usually the first thing is they're always watchful for them. If they see wolves walking by, trotting by, the wolves might actually be searching for vulnerable prey, but they don't act as if they're hunting. And deer that see wolves, if they're not actively hunting and if they're not acting as if they know the deer is there and they're sniffing, getting all excited and trying to stalk in their direction, things like that. They don't worry about wolves. They can live normal lives among wolves. They can live normal lives among hunters, humans that also become hunters. And they do that by recognizing hunting behavior. When that farmer in the tractor, he smells the same, he looks the same, except he's got a blaze orange on now, but he looks the same. That might be part of it too, but now he's sneaking in, or a big bunch of them got a line, a skirmish line there, making a drive through this woodlot, and a whole bunch of hunters on the other side are waiting for him to come out. And they know, well, these bucks have been around a long time. Older bucks that are 3.5 to 6.5 years of age, they've seen it all. And when they may see a line of hunters marching in a direction toward a woodlot, they know they don't want to be in that woodlot because there's going to be a drive coming through there. They don't want to be there. They'll move out early, or they've got places in that woodlot where they can lay down in dense cover where they can't be seen. Maybe next to a little swampy area or a little hummock out in that swampy area. Lay down there and the hunters will go by them on both sides and they won't. Or they hear them coming and say, oh, now they're going to spread out here because there's this little swamp here. Or maybe it's a pothole. And I'll lay down in the cattails there on one side or any part of that. And if I lay down in there, it might be wet there, but if I lay down and keep my head down, they'll go right by me. Or in that plum thicket over there, all full of thorns, all thick, brushy little spot. I'm going to lay down in that plum thicket. And they'll go right by me. They've learned that. These deer have seen it, the older ones have seen it for 6 years. And they're still alive because they know what to do when they're confronted with all these things that happen during hunting season. And what's even strange, don't ask me how they do it. I know how they would do it in a forest area, but in the farm area, I don't know how they do it. But I know farmers. I've heard this story many times, including farmers or people who own land in South Dakota have said the same thing. That they can have big bucks in their yard all summer long. They're feeding there. Some of them they keep salt in the yard. Then they come for the salt. But there's certain times of the year when, salt. A deer, a mature whitetail, is not going to take a chance of losing his life for a lick of salt during the hunting season. No way. Or minerals either. In fact, they don't even care to eat minerals anymore. By that time, the antlers are fully formed, the fawns are weaned out. Whitetails just don't crave minerals anymore in the fall when we hunt them, so that's not a big deal to them. But anyway, so, but one of the strange things about bucks, you know, I've heard this story many times now over the years, is that shortly before hunting season, the farmer said, "Boy, I got my X on that big buck." You know, other guys, neighbors said, "Boy, that's a big one." No, he said, "I got my X on. Well, I'm getting that one this fall." They just keep disappearing 2-3 days before the season begins, and then they don't show up again until maybe a week or so after the hunting season ends. Now, how do they do that? Well, I can understand the ending part. You don't even hear any more shooting. You know, they say, "Well, it must be over, but I'm going to lay in this cottontail swamp for a while longer to be sure." But in the beginning, how in the world do they know that hunting season is about to begin and it's time to get out of here? But they do it all the time. So they're pretty smart about stuff like that, you know. So on that, you know, and being able to do that, to identify the difference between a hunting farmer and a not hunting farmer, and being able to do that enables them to determine, well, gee, the hunting season is about to begin, or gee, the shooting has started, or here comes a skirmish line. What am I going to do? Well, I'll do the same thing I did in the last 5 years. I went over across the road up here a little ways and went along that creek bank and the brushy creek and got over to that tree line that goes across field there, and there's a fence line there. And then I get into this area over there where that big white barn is and lay down in that pasture over there, and they never bother me. I can lay there the whole season. And the bucks don't realize that when they go by this one little sign, that's what made it possible. It says no trespassing or no hunting. Now, they don't read the signs, I don't think. Although I got a picture of a buck laying in the grass in a pasture area with trees. It was a wooded pasture. And behind a no trespassing sign. You would almost think they recognize that. But they're smart enough to do that, and some of them they don't have to go on. But big bucks, having been chased around sometimes by dogs or wolves or coyotes or whatever, or hunters, get to know a large area that's got escape places in it, places where they can get away from hunters. There might be parks, refuges, posted land, steep wooded hillsides, brushy areas, wet lowlands, you know, water, bogs in there, and the hunters just don't want to go in there, sinking in over their boots in water and mud, whatnot. They know places like that. And if one isn't safe, if they discover, well, I guess I'll go over to that next one. That kind of thing. Another thing, big bucks, the bigger the buck, the bigger his home range. Some big bucks, big dominant bucks will have home ranges up to 2 square miles in size. Up in the wooded area where I am, they tend to be kind of oblong from the east to west. I don't know why. But maybe it's because the winds are westerly, and so if they want a lot of distance to use downwind, keep track of what's upwind, they like it to be longer from east to west than north to south. So, because they need, you know, they can use that more often. But most of them are about, if you did, you know, figure out the total area, it would be about a square mile in size. And that's what, 640 acres, like that. So anyway, it's about that size. And in farm areas, rarely can a buck find a nice oblong that he can call his home range, because so much of it is tilled soil, and that we would grow crops that aren't tall enough to really hide a deer. You know, they want like corn and taller crops, but they'll make do with soybeans. They'll even bed in soybeans, and besides eating them and eating the corn. Corn they love. That's ideal. Hard for a hunter to get close, especially in the fall when the corn stalks are dry and you, hunter, can't walk through a field without making a lot of noisy rustling sounds. And gee, a deer can just keep outmaneuvering humans coming through there, making drives, without, they can be maybe 8-10 rows away while humans are going by them on both sides and just stick there, and they know they can do that and get away with it, and especially if they've had 5, 6 years of experience. Don't worry about heavens coming through a cornfield. But anyway, so, but because, the suitable parts of it, because parts of it aren't really to the liking of deer that are normally forest area deer, they always make use of any forested areas they can. I mean, like these woodlots and these brushy and wooded areas that are not being tilled, but to find enough area that's suitable to them, fields with tall corn crops, and their ranges can get to be really strung out over a long area. There's places where one big buck has been seen by farmers over a length as long as 5 miles. But in that 5 miles, only maybe less than a quarter mile of it, it'll only be less than a quarter mile in width, following these woodlots and these other areas that provide forest-like cover, brush, other kinds of cover. And they need that because, in the spring, when they get back to their home ranges from wintering areas, all those fields are bare. And this forces these deer to congregate in their summer, spring, summer, fall home range, that congregate in these limited areas of forest cover or brush and live there until the crops get tall enough to hide deer. And then now we can spread out into our individual home ranges. And 2 doe ranges might, 2, 3 of them might exist in one big cornfield. And they can make use of soybeans, get to be this tall. These soybeans are getting to be bigger plants. A doe and all her young can lay down in there during the day and not be seen. And way out there in the middle of a soybean field, it's perfectly safe there because nothing can see them out there. So anyway, a big buck's home range is large, meaning it's going to include lots of different properties, some of which are almost certain to be posted. So there's going to be areas in that buck's home range where he is safe from hunters. It's hardly a big buck that doesn't have safe areas to bed when not feeding during the day when hunters are afoot. And they're proven safe because hunters can't go, this area is posted, they bed over in there. So big bucks that have the moxie to do something like this can get to be pretty old, every year doing the same thing that they've already proven works to avoid being taken by big hunters. Now, young deer, fawns and yearlings, they don't know anything about that. And because of that, especially if they get separated from their mothers, some of the does can be every bit as elusive as those older bucks, and they can live twice as long in the wilds. But so they can be every bit as elusive as the big bucks. But not those younger deer. Those fawns and yearlings, they get separated from their mother, they become easy prey for hunters. And for this reason, they're the most vulnerable deer for hunters making drives, and hunters who like to be still hunters, who like to move around afoot while hunting a lot. Because those deer are not as good as identifying and avoiding hunters. And they don't know where to go where it's safe. They've been there, but it didn't make a big impression on them. When a 2.5-year-old buck you meet in the wild, this is the first year they're on their own, and they still can be making mistakes. Some of them are almost yearling-like and making mistakes. But if they survive that year, that 2.5-year-old year, then next year they're going to be a buck that a lot of guys would put on the wall. And maybe rightfully so if you're a bull hunter. Geez, 3.5-year-old bucks are commonly big enough to be in the record buck, in the Pope and Young record buck. So, that's a nice buck. So anyway, some 2.5-year-olds are be easy then, but those older ones, the ones we all dream about, on the magazine covers and calendars, those kind of bucks, boy, they are They know more about how to avoid hunters than any forest area buck. And they have all this, they know how to identify when a hunter is dangerous and when it isn't. So you might think, well, holy cow, that sounds impossible. But it isn't impossible to hunt those bucks. The thing to do is keep your odds as high as possible by hunting them where they're most vulnerable, from mid-September until January 1st, well, December 31st. And there are periods during that time when they are more vulnerable than normal, or let's say they're most vulnerable, no matter what. Because, and the thing that gets them is the fact that they are born to try to become the most dominant buck of a square mile. And upon reaching that goal, they become the bucks that do all the breeding. And it's nature's way of assuring that our whitetails have the best genetics. Our whitetails are passed from generation to generation of whitetails. That's a really good thing. That's a good thing about that. It's hard for hunters though. So, but that's the way it works. But during all this stuff that's going on, there are times when they're more vulnerable than other times. And so let's start at the beginning. I already talked to you about hunting during early archery seasons, like in September. Now, in that time, the best place to hunt those deer, they're most vulnerable when they're in their feeding areas, morning and evening, during from mid-September to mid-October, in that period. There's special feeding areas. That's where you're going to find the big bucks, and that's when they're most vulnerable. Everywhere else, it's just a guessing game that you usually lose. Trying to predict where bucks are going to be. It's a time when you're not going to do well with lures of any kind, except maybe a feeder you get over there, but you don't need them there because they're there to fight. You're going to hear clattering antlers there. Kind of a fun place to be. But during that month, that's the place to hunt. That's where you're most likely to see and take a big buck. So key on that. When you're hunting other places, your odds are not going to be near as good. Because big bucks are very good at finding humans at other places. This is a place they got to go. Where you decide you want them to go, they don't have to go there. No matter what you do there, what kind of lure you use, whether you're using rattling antlers or turnips, they don't have to go there. But they have to go to a place where they can battle with other bucks to determine who amongst them is going to be the most dominant buck of this square mile. They have to do that. So that's the place you want to hunt, you see? Yeah, that's where your odds will always be best during that period. Okay, the next period comes. This is probably the one that everybody dreams about, but they hunt, they dream about for the wrong period of time. More than 90% of the antler rubs and ground scrapes are made during the 2 to 3 weeks before breeding begins in early November. From about mid-October until the first days of November is when all these antler rubs and ground scrapes are being made. And, there's lots of reasons hunters believe bucks do this. But the main reason they do it is because it's the way whitetails mark their intended breeding ranges. Now, every antlered buck wants to have a breeding range, including a yearling. That's genetically imprinted in their minds, in their brains. They just kind of do this. And they do it by marking them with antler rubs and ground scrapes, which are visually, you can see them. Antler rubs you can see way over there in the woods, They want other bucks to be able to see them really, and they douse them with the antler rubs with musk that comes from glands in the scalps of their heads. Runs the viscous fluid that runs down the sides of their neck and makes the next fur wrinkle on each side. They rub that on those antler rubs. So not only can other bucks see them, but they can smell them. And the big dominant bucks, when they get to be older, bigger bucks, they produce a lot of that miscus. So their antler rubs are not only huge, which all by itself differentiates a rub made by a big buck, but it has lots of scalp scent on it. And same with ground scrapes. They're doused with musk that comes from their tarsal glands. And that musk is carried to the ground by urine. They urinate on their legs while they're standing with all 4 feet planted on that scrape, and the urine carries that musk down to the ground. So that thing is a visual thing. Oh, come on, there's a, it's a great big one and branches over it are all busted up, which kind of happens later in October as big bucks get pretty furious about other bucks being in there, and they want to make a big impression on them. They're going to just slaughter those branches above there, pieces hanging there and pieces on the scrape. And it's stinking with musk, lots of musk. Other bucks really, well, you know, they smell that and they see that happen. So this is the sign of the big dominant buck listener, and he's the guy that just got done beating the daylights out of you. And if you want trouble, you better get out of here, stay out of here. And most of the other bucks that have been through this, older bucks, they understand the program. They'll willingly settle in small areas off range until breeding is over. Some of the younger ones are going to keep sneaking back, especially yearlings. They get pain in the neck for older bucks, but it keeps older bucks from getting a lot of sleep during this period when breeding begins. So, when breeding begins, all of a sudden, bucks are not paying much attention to those ground scrapes and antler rubs anymore, which they would regularly renew during the 2 to 3 weeks before breeding begins. And while they're hunting for other bucks that dared to come back after being chased out. But anyway, during that period, when they're doing this, scrape trails are the place to be. That's a great place. They're not so great once breeding begins, because once that starts, those big dominant bucks don't have much time for that. Then the ones that were made by those lesser bucks in their local pecking order, they're not even here. They're hiding off range for a while. So during that period, and you can go out there and put all the doe and estrus lures in, you all went all over those ground scrapes or make so-called mock scrapes. That's not going to make a heck of a lot of difference during that period. Especially when, you know, those bucks can smell does in heat, does emitting the pheromone that says, I want to breed, a mile away. And, you know, you put some out there in the woods and you got a ground scrape right over here and you put all kinds of doe and estrus lure scent there. Your scent and that scent are mingling together going downwind. Ever enlarging area. 200 yards downwind, that triangle down there is 200 yards wide. Big wide area. And a buck walks into that, oh, he smells that doe and estrus lure scent. But they also smell your scent. Doesn't matter how high you are on the tree, they still smell your scent over there. Nowadays, older bucks know that that's dangerous to approach those kind of areas. You'll still get younger ones, like I said, yearling bucks and 2.5-year-old bucks that will come to that. But not as many 2.5-year-old bucks as you might imagine. But you'll see some, usually. And yearling bucks, oh, you can see a lot of those during the hunting season coming to that kind of scent. But not the big guys. Once they got you pegged there, they might walk by every morning or every afternoon before they do anything else to check from downwind where you can't even see them. And, oh yeah, that hunter is still there. You know, I smell him there, so I'm not going to go anywhere near that place. I can live a perfectly nice life. I'll feed over there, I'll go get water over there, and I'll check those all around the area, and even upwind of the hunter. And so I can do everything I'm supposed to be doing as a dominant breeding buck without any concern about that hunter, because he's a stand hunter. It's these other guys that give me trouble. If they are walking around, sometimes they get awful close, and all of a sudden, oh geez, there's one right there. Or here comes the big skirmish line, a whole bunch of hunters, all the scent mingling from coming downwind, and I know what that means, I got to get out of here. So, and they do it all the time. They're very good at it. But the stand hunter, they know they don't have to do that because they don't chase deer. They don't stalk deer. They don't hunt deer. And if that hunter was smart and doesn't display any hunting behavior when going to and from the stand site, so he doesn't alarm deer along the way, that hunter is going to be somebody who's going to take deer. And if the hunter doesn't stay in one stand site the whole season, because the big bucks are going to find him soon and it's not going to go there, well, chances of those scan hunters getting a big buck, a big downed buck, are very poor once he's been found there. So they can live normal lives without abandoning the area. Anyway, if you do it like the Nordbergs do it, like you see in my book, to hunt like Doc, you're going to move often. I mentioned it before. If you're just determined to grow turnips or some kind of clover that's supposed to grow great big antlers, I suppose that's okay. But don't believe that bucks smelling that are powerless to come to that. They may come there before the season or at night or something and eat whatever you have there and sniff things, but they know, they've got all this experience. Too dangerous. Here's all this fresh trail scent here and all the things that warn a buck this is a dangerous place to be, an older buck. But if you do it right, if you like what we do, when I find a place I want to hunt near a scrape trail, here's a big scrape over there, like the kind I was talking about, and I'm looking for him way over there. I see one, I don't rush up to it and stand there and look at it. And then say, oh, gee, I'm gonna put up a mock scraper, a drip thing over that old boy. They'll just come here. You're thinking things like that. And gee, I want to be in a tree, that one over there, and I like that one because I can see way far away here. Be able to see the buck coming from a long way off. And you get up there, and if you're not well hidden, that buck is going to see you from a safe distance before it even gets close and be gone and never come back to that spot again during the hunting season. And you look at these guys in these hunting movies that are in places like that with no more cover than what you might get from a telephone pole and saying, well, he didn't come today, maybe tomorrow, that kind of place like that. They'll never come. In fact, they'll quit coming well before the hunter realizes it's already ruined. So that's not good. And anyway, so when I see one over there, I never go close to that trail from that point on for at least 100 to 200 yards on either side of it on that trail. I come at that from crosswind, and I sit crosswind within bow range with 20 yards. That's close enough. But I don't want any of my trail scent on that trail. I'm not going to fiddle around with doe and estrus lucerne or anything, because that big buck is determined during that 2 to 3 week period to renew his musk odors there once every 24 to 48 hours. And nothing is going to keep him from doing it except unusually warm weather, or stormy weather, or finding you. That'll keep him from coming back. That's it. Anything you do over there on that trail or at that scrape site is going to add all kinds of stuff that's going to make it just plain easy for that buck to know you're there. And don't rattle antlers. Don't blow a grunt call. Don't blow a bleat call, a fawn call. Don't do any of that stuff. Just be very still and very quiet and not get any closer than 20 yards from that scrape. And then your odds during that period will be excellent. If you don't do anything else, your odds will be excellent. But the more you do, the more you use all these other things, the poorer your chances will be. And then the next thing, don't sit there for 2 weeks every day or every other day or every weekend. Because if you've gone 2 days, 3 at the most, I mean, you have to be pretty darn good stand hunter to avoid identifying that deer early. And you don't see it, it means he knows you're there. That's why, otherwise he'd be there. You'd see him sometime. And it can happen any time of the day. The bucks, when they're doing this, they're so anxious to make sure there's no other bucks in their breeding range, these big problems. They can come by any time of the day. They can come by at noon, early morning, late in Africa. They're most active while deer are feeding. That's best time. That's number one. But never discount the fact that they might show up at noon. It can happen. So that's where you want to hunt in that period. Okay, now let's get on here. Now you come to the breeding periods. Now, estrus, or being in heat in does, is triggered by a special ratio of darkness to sunlight, which is fairly constant from November, during November, December, and even January, early January. And during this period, a doe that is not bred in November will go into estrus again 28 days later, and then 28 days later again if still not bred. So one doe can be in estrus 3 times. But during the first period in November, 85% of does are bred, and that includes yearling does. They're all bred. And in some states like in Iowa and Virginia, during years when there's a really good white oak acorn crop, some yearling fawns will go into estrus and bear young as yearlings the following spring. So even they can be a part of this program. But anyway, so where do you hunt then? Well, you don't hunt scrape trails. If in November you come across a freshly renewed scrape in November, what it generally means is it was made by a big buck that was with a doe in estrus, and another buck was shadowing him, and he's showing that big buck, or he's renewing his odors there, his musk odors, and he's tearing up those branches overhanging his scrape, and he's showing that other buck what's going to happen if he sticks around. He might even, if the other buck wasn't impressed with that, he might just charge him, chase him away. He won't go far though, because he won't stay away. He won't get far from that doe in heat that is wet. But when you find that in November, that's a hot spot. Because if you didn't screw up getting there, making a lot of noise and that kind of thing, they were close. Chances are those deer are very near. Then they're very near for one of two reasons. Either a feeding area is very close, or a bedding. The doe bedding area is very close. So that doe is going to be in heat for 24 to 26 hours. Now, what I've found happens a lot, I mean not just once, a lot. When I find one there in November, I come on one, I don't care when I find it. If I find it at 6 o'clock in the morning dark while heading to another stand site, and I see something like that, I back off crosswind and sit down in natural cover and wait. And I don't have to be very far, maybe 25 yards, even during the gun season. It's pretty close, but I'm away from it. Maybe 50 yards at the most, but I back off where I'm going to be well in and wait. And time after time after time, I've had that buck show up anywhere between 15 minutes and 4 hours. So, anyway, that's a good spot then, but that's the only time. Otherwise, you're wasting your time on ground scrapes once breeding begins. Now, breeding will be going on for 2 weeks, and my area is, if you're on states south of Minnesota, your breeding area might be starting a few days later. All the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, it'll be a little bit later. It might be several days down there in Alabama or Georgia. But up here, this is when it's happening in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Dakotas, Michigan. Well, November 3rd it starts. And then during that 2-week period, where do you want to hunt? Not ground scrapes. Feeding and bedding areas of does. You can't always tell when does are in heat just by looking at them. But, within a dominant buck's breeding range, there'll be 4 or 5 mature does and 2 or 3 yearling does. And they're going to feed while they're in heat no matter what. So the best place is to feed feeding areas with lots of doe tracks and maybe fawn tracks and yearling tracks as well. They're fresh and fresh droppings, anywhere from 1/4 inch long for little fawns to 1/2 inch for does. And yearling buck droppings are also 1/2 inch, but they're usually clumped. So those will be in feeding areas. And that time of the year, they're going to be feeding on browse. Like this year, our season starts on the 9th. I'm not looking for grassy areas. They're going to be feeding on red osiers. It's a woody little shrub with red bark on it. Or mountain maples, gray bark. They have maple-like leaves, like sugar maple-like leaves on them. Or saplings of various other plants, like saplings of sugar maple. Oh man, they love those. Those are red, dark red. But browse areas, that's where I'm going to be on it. With doe-sized tracks and the tracks of their young. Doesn't necessarily have to have the buck tracks. If those tracks are out there, you know, if you got snow, there they are out there. You see there's little tracks by bigger tracks. That doe may or may not be an estrus. Now, this might be a day when there's no doe in estrus in this buck's home range. It might be 2 or 3 days like that. And during those days, he's going to be cruising in search of does. You know, he can't be downwind of everybody, so he's going to be cruising in search of does and estrus. And he's going to be covering his entire range, generally following scrape trails, but not necessarily. Once hunting begins, big bucks will travel off trail more than 50% of the time, so you can't count on that. And besides that, on any one day, he'll be using different trails, depending on wind direction and cover and where he knows bucks, where humans are hunting, or stand hunters and others. So it's going to keep changing, so you can't count on trail, except trails next to feeding areas where does are feeding right now today. And those fresh tracks and droppings tell you where that is. So that's where you want to. At midday, where's those deer going to be? They're going to be in the doe's bedding area, and that's where most breeding occurs. A doe maybe stand for breeding 4 times during that midday hour rest period, from 10 to about 3 in the afternoon. And when she gets up, she'll be moving around, and that big buck will be with her. That's a good place to take a big buck midday during the hunting season. So when breeding is going on, you want doe feeding areas and doe bedding areas. Bedding areas midday, feeding areas early and late midday. And your odds then will be best. And between those 3 periods, now the next breeding period will begin about December 1st. And then the final one will begin just a few days before the first of the year. And after that, you can't hunt them. But hunt those areas in between there. Weather will have most influence on where to hunt. And I've talked to you about those things in previous seminars. And you'll find, of course, everything you want to know about all of these periods and where and how to hunt them in this book. So keep that in mind. That's why this book is so vulnerable, is so important. You want to be a big buck hunter, you got to know the things like I've been talking to you about here, about where to hunt and when. So anyway, get your book if you haven't gotten it yet. You guys at the bottom, well, thanks for buying them. And boy, you're going to, and long after I'm dead and gone, you're going, which might not be so far in the future, considering my, you're going to be using this book all your life to get better hunting for big bucks or any deer for that matter. So make sure you get one of these soon. Well, thanks again, guys, and before you leave, be sure to punch that little red button out there, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and poke that thumbs up button as well. I really would appreciate it. So, yeah, I want to be able to continue this as long as I can, and as long as I got lots of you guys watching me, I'll be able to do that. So with that, thanks a lot. See you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.